Hey gang, I want to take a moment and review with you the process that is used to get an access point connected to a wireless LAN controller. How do we get this hookup? Because I never actually went in here and clicked add access point or something like that. But this access point, this AeroNet 2700, came into contact with the wireless LAN controller based upon this IP address 192.168.5.52 that's owned by the access point. And now this is subject to the jurisdiction of this wireless LAN controller. How did that happen, gang? Here's what I'd like for you to do. In a second, I'd like for you to pause the video, and I'd like for you to either write out or, better yet, take a screenshot and draw out what are the components, the pieces, the protocols, whatever it is you can put together that would describe how an access point gets joined into a wireless LAN controller. And I'll give you a hint. I can think of 3 ways that that can occur. All right, let's go ahead and pause, and then we'll take a look together. Okay, let's take a moment and see how access points get connected to wireless LAN controllers. Now, there's 3 different methods. If you are in the same broadcast domain, the same VLAN, the same subnet, then it's pretty straightforward, right? All you have to do is get the wireless LAN controller, all right, that is plugged into a switch. All right, so here's our layer 2 access layer switch. That's all we're talking about here. And that's associated with the access point. All right, so here is our 2700. Again, this access point is going to broadcast out and discover the wireless LAN controller that is on the same subnet. So that's why typical configuration, it's very normal to just ensure that these have the same management VLAN available to them. Now, how does the access point get an IP address? Well, of course, that means that we will have to have DHCP as a service running somewhere. It might be on a device, might be on a separate server. Not really concerned about that in this case, but it needs to be given an IP address into that VLAN to allow them to discover each other via just a localized broadcast. All right, so that's a good start. But are there other methods? Yes. Remember that although the broadcast is one method, there's also the ability to configure DHCP. So remember, we just talked about DHCP. We know the access point is going to need to get an IP address, like 192.168.5.52. How does it get it? Typically through DHCP. All right, so here we are. We're connected to a layer 2 access switch, and from here we also have a DHCP server. Remember that DHCP can supply option 43 in order to identify to the access point where the wireless LAN controller is on the network. And that's important because maybe we work our way up through a layer 3 infrastructure. Maybe we've got our wireless LAN controller out here, and maybe this is in VLAN 10 where our access points are in VLAN 100. That's okay. It's not like they can't cross between VLANs as long as we have a default gateway in place being given via the DHCP server to the access points. They can be instructed, go find your wireless LAN controller via the DHCP instructions. All right, so that works out great. Or, remember, there's a third option available to us as well. What would that one look like? Option number 3, again, to support the remote wireless LAN configuration. I particularly like this one for Flex Connect scenarios where maybe I've got an access point that is connected to a switch. There's our layer 2 switch that's maybe connected to layer 3 switches, connected to a router. All right, remember that's our Flex Connect scenario is typically a remote access scenario. So we've got another router, top of our layer 3 infrastructure there, layer 3, layer 2, working our way down. So in this case, what's the service that can help me track down this wireless LAN controller? Well, I like having DNS serve me in that case, because remember, inside of DNS, we can actually configure a resource record that provides the information I need. So this process that we're describing would mean that the DNS server would have an A record, a host record, that is actually called Cisco-LWAP LWAP, always forget that second P, dash controller. and it would reference the management IP address of that controller, right? Whatever that IP is up there. And by the way, that'll need to be in a domain namespace that the access point recognizes. So this goes back again to DHCP. DHCP is going to be what tells the access point what its IP address is, what its default gateway is. That'll be important to get out of the network. It's going to tell it where its DNS server is, so it can look these pieces of information up. And it also needs to tell it what its domain name is. So there's a domain reference that you put in, I believe it's option 15, and that domain reference is important because that's the context in which to query DNS. So make sure that you are specifying both of these values in addition to creating the actual record inside of DNS. Then once again, you've given very specific instructions for the access point to go find a wireless LAN controller wherever it might be in your network. Again, the nice thing about DHCP and DNS is they give you a couple of different tools and options depending on who's managing what in your network in order to direct the behavior to the correct location. So the right access points are pointed to the right wireless LAN controllers. It's not necessarily that first scenario, the broadcast free-for-all. It's a very controlled, structured way to provide access. All right, gang, thanks for reviewing that. Hopefully you came up with one of those three scenarios. Remember, the broadcast is very normal. Nothing wrong with that if that was your scenario, but I wanted to remind you of those other methods as well.